Well, folks, I just came out of the shower, but I'm in rant mood right now, shower thoughts and all. So even though my hair is still half wet and weird, we're gonna do this. I mean, who cares anyway? This is not a beauty channel. Or is it? I saw a video by Matt Easton yesterday, although by the time I publish this, it's going to be a bit longer ago, talking about weapon bans, and I felt like responding to it. How's it going, Matt? You mundane normie. Just teasing you. So his perspective was that of a normal guy explaining these things to other normal people. And there's a good point in having to adjust the arguments and the way you present things a little bit for people who are not involved in this community and don't know anything about historical arms and armor and don't really care. So even though I could perhaps be considered more of an eccentric guy. Drive me closer. I want to hit them with my sword. I'm still going to chime in and try to explain it to people who are not self-identified sword nerds or geeks or what have you. So just a few words about normalcy. First off, this is one of those words that everybody thinks they know what it means, but it has a lot of different meanings and it depends heavily on context. Social contexts vary significantly. What's considered normal in the office is going to be very different from what's considered normal at an old folks' home versus what's normal at a teenage party or what's normal at Comic-Con. It's a bit of a nebulous term. It's kind of a symbol, just like a flag. If I showed you the Canadian flag or the UK flag for that matter, it's all Commonwealth, right? Different people are going to tell you somewhat different things about what this flag means, what the country stands for, what its values are, etc. You're definitely going to get similar answers, but you're also going to get very different ones. And the assumption is that everybody's on the same page about what this thing symbolizes, which they really aren't. And some people can, quote unquote, pass as normal in everyday life when interacting with other normal people, but then they can be quite a bit different in their personal life. I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example, but a lot of serial killers have been described as normal or, really nice people and, productive members of society and essential to their community and etc. We could have never foreseen that this person has a torture chamber in their basement. They seem so normal. I guess that particular example might come somewhat close to undermining my point, but what I'm saying here is that just because somebody has interests and hobbies that are different from yours or looks different from you, that doesn't mean they're a psychopath or a danger or risk or whatever. Just like if you have completely quote-unquote normal hobbies and interests, that doesn't necessarily mean that you might not be a hidden psycho. So let's just assume for the sake of simplicity, normal means a functional member of society who doesn't do significant harm to others. How you define harm that opens up another can of worms. So if we go with that simplified definition, then the majority of the historical martial arts community of sword collectors, knife enthusiasts, etc. are predominantly normal. So the usual objection that people have who push for bans has to do with the design. They're designed to kill. They have no other purpose. That is pretty much universally wrong. There is no such thing as a single purpose item, aside from highly specialized tools and devices. A pizza cutter is not going to be great for landscape painting, although Bob Ross could have probably pulled it off. And the Large Hadron Collider is not going to be great for cooking pizza, I think. And yes, I think about pizza too much. Without wanting to go deeply into discussions about gun regulation, a firearm can have purposes other than taking lives in warfare or gang violence or what have you. It can be a tool for civilian self-defense where it can actually potentially save a life or prevent the loss of a life. It can be used for recreational target practice. It can be used for sports, like Matt mentioned, Olympic shooting. There's a number of disciplines. It can be used for hunting, which is necessary in areas that don't have natural predators anymore. So you have to control the local deer population, etc. And it can also be a collector's item in case of antiques or particular rare items, the infamous gold-plated desert eagle and what have you. So there are a number of potential purposes that something could be used for. And so if you ask, why do you need this? That's the wrong question to ask unless you want to live in a dystopian, oppressive nightmare. Because asking this sort of question puts the default on what should you be allowed? So the default is everything should be prohibited unless otherwise specified, pretty much, unless you have a justification for it. And this can bite normal people in the ass in a number of ways. Matt mentioned dogs. And some people do call for the ban of certain breeds of dog. But if you wanted to make an argument, so do people really need dogs? Do you absolutely need a dog for your survival? Well, some people will say they have dogs for home protection, as an alarm system of sorts. But then the same people who might argue for a ban could say, well, just get an alarm system, call the cops, etc., whatever. It's not worth the danger that dogs pose to other people. They can point to incidences where a child has been mauled by a dog or whatever, which they often do, anecdotal evidence and all that. Same thing with cars. Obviously, the fatalities from car accidents are extremely high. And you could argue, well, some people don't really need a car, do they? If you live in the city or within reasonable commuting range, you could use public transit, you could use a bicycle, you could do all kinds of things. You don't absolutely have to have a car unless you conduct business with the vehicle. Things like that. Is that reasonable? Hell no. And of course, that kind of reasoning can be applied to a lot of hobbies. Why do you need this? Can't you do something else? Can't you just go for a walk? But the thing is, hobbies and recreation is essential. Even the most callous, soulless corporation wants you to have hobbies. Not because they care about your well-being, but because they want you to consume. And yeah, it is an essential part of well-being. So you should be able to pursue whatever you want, really. And including things like recreational drug use. This is a topic where I personally don't have a horse in the race because I don't do drugs, unless you want to count caffeine. I don't do illicit drugs, I guess you could say. So I don't have a vested interest in that, but at the same time, I'm all in favor of legalizing them and regulating them, especially with regards to quality control. Anything, if taken out of context, can be misrepresented as, oh, this is completely unnecessary. Like take American football, for example. There's a very high rate of injury. There is concussions out the wazoo and all kinds of other injuries, ACL tears, etc. There's all kinds of injuries involved. Same with things like rugby. So you could say, okay, so all this health risk for just physical fitness and recreation? No, we should ban that. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You should let people make that decision. It's up to them what they do with their own bodies. If they want to take certain risks, extreme sports, whatever, that's up to them. And that should be the default. The responsibility should not be on the people who engage in this activity to prove that they have a need for it, that it's reasonable, etc. No, the responsibility should be on whoever is trying to limit their access to it. They should be the ones required to prove or demonstrate or argue that the risk is higher than the benefit, or well, not even that there is a systemic risk. Basically, that there is a risk or a cost to society overall that's not worth the benefits. So if somebody wants to ban swords or specific swords or flails or what have you. It's on them to show, any significant statistics showing that there's rampant flailings or, assault with swords or other significant detriments to public safety. You can't just be like, well, this is dangerous. A lot of things are dangerous. It's not an argument. I mean, it is, but it's a terrible one. Same with the design argument. Things can be repurposed. Even if they were designed for one thing, they can be used for another. And part of the cost-benefit analysis should also be how effective is it even to ban this. For example, if you ban this, people are going to use that perhaps. If you ban this, they might use a different type of knife. If you ban that too, they'll use this or that. The balisong ban is another good example. It has been argued that the point of the ban is to protect people from themselves, basically, because some have injured themselves with a balisong, trying to do tricks with a sharp blade, which you shouldn't. There are blunt trainers if you're just learning. But that's the argument. So people hurt themselves, so we need to get rid of this thing. Well, there are other options. First off, maybe just accept the fact that people will engage in risky behavior because they think it's worth it. But two, maybe focus more on keeping it away from minors. For example, you could say it's the responsibility of the parents, for example, who might have a knife like that to make sure that their kids can't play with them. And it's the responsibility of store owners to make sure that minors won't buy these. Now, in that case, when people hurt themselves unnecessarily because they didn't take safety seriously enough, they played with a sharp blade instead of a blunt one, there's other ways to disincentivize that. For example, how about increasing their healthcare rates? Just like with a car, if you have an accident, your insurance rates go up. How about something like that? You go to the hospital because you injured yourself doing something stupid. Okay, your rates go up for health insurance. It is a partial burden on taxpayers. Now, the problem with that, of course, is you can go a little bit too fanatical and take it too far. Like, for example, saying, oh, you know what? Sugar consumption should increase your health insurance because you're doing damage to your own body or whatever, not exercising or this and that and the other. That makes you more likely to get sick, which requires healthcare, which costs, etc. But I think in cases like this, you could make an argument for it. Definitely better than just straight up banning something. I don't know about you, but personally, I'd rather live as freely as possible. Now, there's no such thing as a 100% free society or a 100% safe one. On the other hand, because to be 100% safe, you would basically have to be locked up and monitored and have your vitals monitored and have your lifestyle completely regimented to avoid any kind of risk and do everything 100% to prolong your life expectancy and everything. That would be a horrendous, nightmarish dystopia to live in. But on the other hand, so would be a society with 100% freedom where you can do anything at any time to anyone. So I said, I think the default should be you can own what you want, you can do what you want, unless there is a significant risk to society, public safety, etc. And you have to, there's quite a bit of burden of proof on whoever is trying to make that claim. That would be the ideal, in my opinion. So yeah, let me know what you think. Typey down below. Let's have a bit of an open discussion, a respectful one. Don't start flinging insults at anyone who disagrees with you. Just try to be halfway reasonable instead of just shit-flinging chimps, the way the internet quite often is. Anyway, hope you found it interesting or entertaining or who knows what. Thanks for watching and have a good one.